The Front Row Back Row podcast is a show where two grad school buddies discuss physical therapy entrepreneurship. I helped guide a company to an 8-figure exit, and I'm now starting my own mobile company. Brian grew his mobile practice to 4 clinics, and he's now doing $1 million in revenue. Join us as we help you grow your own business. Hello and welcome to the Front Row Back Row podcast. My name is Dr. Owen Campbell. I am the owner of Simplify Motion Physical Therapy in Phoenix, Arizona. And with me, as always, is Dr. Brian Wolf, owner of Evolution PT and Fitness in Connecticut and Long Island. How are we doing today, Brian?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Let's motivate and do it. Tell them
Very
the topic.
motivational. So topic today that we're going to talk about, we talk a lot to the solopreneur, right? The person maybe thinking about starting a cash practice, maybe thinking about starting an insurance practice. But today we're really going to focus on something that most people either want to be at soon, or a lot of our listeners, they got 1, 2, 3, 84 employees, right? So we're going to talk a lot about employee motivation. And the reason we want to focus on this is that if we really want to dream big, if we really want to say, I want to help not just the people who can get on my schedule within a week, but I want to help my community, right? And grow a big company, we are going to have to switch from the solopreneur to the leader, right? And for some people, that's a natural transition, right? Other people, man, they were just a hell of a PT, and now they're looking at this thing like, how do I get this one person to care as much as me? Right.
Yeah.
So, and that's where I think it's really interesting. I know, Brian, you've always said no one's going to care about your business as much as you do. Right.
100%.
And that goes for all levels, right? From solopreneur all the way up to, people who founded major companies. Right. And I think that's where I want to kind of jump off with this topic of motivating employees and how it's a big differentiator, really, right? How the good businesses really become big when they can do this.
I agree. I mean, I think at the end of the day, when you think about, how to motivate employees, like I actually think of Simon Sinek a lot. If anybody's ever talked about Simon, like we've talked about that author, and he's somebody who's run marketing agencies and marketing companies. And one of the things he's talked about is you have to start with why. You have to understand that people are aligned with what you're doing. And people can fall in and out of alignment with your company all the time. That's why it's like, wow, that employee was so amazing, and now they're not, blah, blah. Or some people can be like, well, they were kind of like a, C or B employee, and now they're an A employee because like you just kind of like clicked. A lot of it's the why, right? And the analogy in the company where this really clicked for me is think about not-for-profits, right? Nonprofits in particular. Like it's not notorious that people don't make a ton of money in these nonprofits, but think about a company like Scholastic, right? So think about Scholastic. It's an amazing company mission. They basically are helping people and want to teach kids how to read, right? Teach them how to read better, right? That's the whole goal. So like if you find employees that want that mission, align themselves with that mission, it's a clear mission and a clear why. I think that's a really good way to motivate people, is that they just they believe in the company. They believe what the company's doing, right? And they believe what they're doing. Evolution, our mission and my personal mission in physical therapy is to bridge the gap between rehab and performance. Right. And that is what I want to do. And ultimately use it to change the perception of physical therapy. That is my goal. Right. And so in that wheelhouse, like I hire people, and people who are attracted to me are people who are like, that's sick. I want to be a part of that. Right.
Yeah.
Like that's it.
And that just speaks to the importance of mission, right? You just mentioned hiring. We're talking about employee retention. We're talking about employee motivation, right? Getting the most out of the people you hire, and it really does come all the way down to mission, right? And that's big picture where you need to keep that in some shape or form. And as you get bigger, it's harder to do. And that's why you see all these leadership mentorship programs in these big companies, because the founder needs to at least try to get the middle managers, the senior leadership, all on the same boat, rowing the same way. And of course, it's not going to be perfect as if the founder was in the clinic with you, right? But these are all in everybody's, if you've worked for a big company or you've read any business book in the last 40 years, these things exist, this is something. And I think so to give everyone a background, I worked my way up the corporate ladder mostly because I was pretty good at mentoring clinicians to be leaders, right? Taking them out of the clinic, and not so much out of the clinic, but like teaching them how to lead a team, right? And there's the big picture that has to be there. If it's not there, you're basically swimming upstream. Like there's if your leader's not on board, if the people aren't bought into what you're trying to do, then it just becomes a profit generator, right? It's like, oh, I can make money for somebody. Awesome. You need to have that leadership. Let's just assume you do.
Yeah,
Right?
for sure.
Big assumption, right?
We should do one on leadership sometime. We should do a podcast. That's a good one too. We
I
can talk
know,
about
I know.
podcasting, but leadership would be a good one.
Oh my god, you won't get me to shut up.
Same.
But the nuts and bolts of it, I think, are important, and that's something that I think gets lost in all this high level talk and high level reading and where you need to be as a company. Is that the minutia of management is my big thing, and I think that motivating employees comes down to the fact that they think you're in the trenches. If you're the first line manager, right, you wouldn't ask them to do something that you wouldn't do yourself if you had to. Right now, obviously, if you're a manager, you're doing other things. But if you had to clean the toilet, you clean the toilet, right? But I think the biggest thing is you have to do a lot
I've
of
cleaned the toilet, by the way.
Exactly, you should.
So we're clear for those people who think that this is a glamorous thing, and it's not always.
Yeah, servant leadership, right?
I was funny. Quick sidebar, funny story. I just remember this one gym owner that I was with for a while. It cracked me up. He goes, "Great day to be an entrepreneur. I cleaned pee off the toilet seat and had to go wipe chalk off the floor."
There you go.
Right,
There you go.
or mop the floors or something like that. It was great.
Didn't see that on his Instagram post either.
No. That's the content creation you do not hear.
But those are.
Sorry, I'm messing with your monologue, but.
No, you're good, man. Like, because I think that that's really important to look at. You have to take the time to get to know your employees, right? And yes, you should. Every employee is going to appreciate the fact that you're willing to do the grunt work. But I always have you ever heard of this thing called the Platinum Rule?
No.
Okay, so essentially, there's this book probably 15 years ago, where a guy wrote, "We know the golden rule, where it's treat others like you want to be treated." Right? He said the platinum rule is what you should live by: is treat others how they want to be treated. And what his big thing was is that you have to take the time to do your 5-minute breakout meetings, your huddles, your mentorship time, all that stuff to understand how your employee likes to communicate. Right. So if we both talk on a podcast every week. We are extroverted. We talk all the time. Hey, what's going on? But we may hire somebody who's an excellent therapist who really just wants to connect and doesn't want to have these let's talk about the weather conversations. I need to be able to tailor myself to that particular employee to motivate them, because if I go to them the way I want to go to, they're going to shut right off. Right. So I am a big believer in the minutia of management, where you spend the time as a manager to get to know your people and then be able to then tailor your solutions to whatever problem it is to their kind of communication style. This is one of those, if you've ever been in maybe you haven't been in the corporate world as much as I have. I feel like everyone should know this, but it's not. People talk about communication styles, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Every year someone comes out with one's a lion and one's a gazelle and one's an orange and one's a blue and one's a green, and they are tacky, but honestly in an organizational standing they're actually really effective, because it'll get all your managers to understand that people are different. And if somebody doesn't like the way that you said something, you say, well, is that person a blue or is that person a green? How'd you attack that? Oh, well, maybe because we did these personality tests, this might be a better way to go to her next time when you have to talk to her about not billing correctly. Right.
Yeah. I mean, Ray Dalio has a very interesting way that he does it at Bridgewater, right? From the finance world. And what he talked about is they're called baseball cards. So basically what they do is, I've been involved a little bit with Bridgewater, the more I've seen what they do. So basically it's kind of like, it's inside of it. Obviously it's a multi-billion-dollar, it's one of the biggest hedge funds in the world. And what he did with build computer systems, from reading his book Principles, was that you can do what's called a dot system. So essentially everybody has an iPad, and say someone's performing poorly, you actually rate everybody in the meeting. And so what it does, it by your peers, you're basically, rated on a scale of communication, ability to do X, Y, and Z. So what happens is you can build teams based off of the baseball cards, and you can actually go through that. So for those, a huge Mets fan from what I've been told, but in terms of that process, you can basically create that. And I thought that was actually very smart. To your point, it's it makes sense. And of course they do it with computers and a ton of amazing technology. It's a huge, thing. But to your point, like personalities and communication styles, I mean, those are huge. Those are going to be
Well,
huge pieces.
and I think it's the basis of leadership, right? So like the
Yeah.
basis of employee motivation is they gotta an employee has to think that you're trying, they know you're not gonna be perfect, but they gotta say, well, he's trying his best to understand me, right? And he's doing the best he can in this situation to make my job as best as it can be, right? And there's
Yeah.
some factors, and anybody listening to this needs to know there are a lot of factors that you can't control. And so
Yeah.
don't get too emotionally tied to someone saying, yeah, I'd rather not be here, right? You want to, there are some things that you just can't control, right? Somebody moves out of town, their best friend leaves, and then all of a sudden work isn't as fun anymore for them. um, Different life circumstances where pay and money and time are different valuations than what you can provide. All these different things are very, don't beat yourself up is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, I think a really good book. I actually just grabbed it off our shelf. It's the Five Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace. So for those
Oh
people who
yeah.
are looking at it, right, by Gary Chapman and Paul White, and like if you think about like I think about it like a significant other, right? Like think about the five appreciation languages or the five love languages as they're also required and thought of, right?
Yeah.
Now, as I say them out loud, we'll do the pitfalls of each one. But if you think about like the words of affirmation, right? Quality time, acts of service, tangible gifts, and physical touch. Now,
Yeah.
physical touch, be careful in the
Not in the
workplace.
workplace. Yeah. Yeah.
Guys,
That's
maybe Owen, I'm gonna be like, Owen, rub my shoulders,
absolutely
right?
not. And I'm calling a
Exactly.
lawyer.
So again, to that point, like there's certain ones that we got to be careful in the workplace. But in terms of like word, like I always think like words of affirmation, like whenever someone does a really good job, I try and go over to them and be like, thank really great job, like nice job. Because I also know
Yeah.
like I can be a dick sometimes, like I gotta do something or I gotta say something like, but from a leadership perspective, like going and acknowledging, like, hey man, you did a really good job with that. You killed it
Mhm.
with that. Hey, you're really good at this. Hey, this is something that I need your help with because you're so good at it. Like
Yeah.
doing those words of affirmation, those are huge. And for especially for people, like from a motivation perspective. So I've always found that to be good.
And
As one.
And if you want to learn some of these other tips and tricks and take your PT practice to new heights, you can do it with Physio Growth. Our mentorship program helps physical therapists grow their business and boost income. Join us at school.com/physiogrowth mentorship group. So yeah, what you just talked
Nice.
about, the appreciation. And again, this is where I nerd out in our group, right? And when I have owners who are, how do I get my employees to do this? I'm going to open another clinic. How do I make sure I pick the right manager? Like all this stuff. This is my wheelhouse, man. And
Yeah.
appreciation is the easiest lever you can pull.
Well,
And it's the one that people don't pull enough.
well, here's the thing.
And they don't realize it. They're like, they basically say, well, yeah, that's what the paycheck's for, right?
Yeah,
That's
well,
my
and
appreciation.
so think about it. That's the tangible gift, right? Like
Mhm.
the paycheck is just my expansion of me saying, "Hey, it's this for that," right? But
Yeah.
the reality is like I've had multiple employees that have left other jobs or that were paying them more money to come actually take a pay cut for us. How
Yeah.
can that happen?
Only
Well, they're
20% of employees are motivated primarily by money.
again, yeah.
20%.
Again, because think about it. Owen, we just talked about the five languages. That's 20%, right? Of those
Yeah,
people.
there you
The
go.
people who are right, it's that simple. So like
Mhm.
you're gonna fit in the different buckets. So the reality is like if I'm this tangible gift person, it's why Christmas bonuses matter for some people, but like time off or other things, like again, quality time, like going out as a staff and doing things together, like that's a huge piece. Acts of service, right? Well, think about it, Owen, right? Like 20%, we just went over the five languages, right? It's like
Mhm.
20% would be tangible gifts, right? Like we think about the salary. And again, it's why when people say, well, what about my bonus or those kind of things? Like, well, the reality is like a bonus is again just a gift. So only those certain people are going to be into that. I mean,
Yeah.
if you think about like the acts of service or like the quality time, like going out with staff, taking them out to dinner, like one of my guys just took about to breakfast today. I was like, we had to meet. I was like, I'll buy you breakfast. Don't worry about it. Right. Like that, those types of things are easy. Like spending the time. You nailed it with also like meetings. I'm a big believer in quality time with meetings. So like
Yeah.
we build it in already in our group. Like everybody gets to meet with everybody. They get to talk to us, right? We do some social outings. So like we also obviously we pay people, right? So we give them money. It's like the whole thing. So I think when you think about it, you got to be touching all five languages on a regular basis with everybody.
Yeah.
Otherwise, like people will fall out of this motivation. It's a
Well,
huge piece of it. And then you also got to hire people correctly, right? You got to hire people that are aligned with
yeah.
what you're doing.
Well, and that's it. And all of this is assuming, and this is a whole other podcast about like being able to have a good kind of, sense for who's a good fit, right, in the
Yeah.
hiring process. If you nail that, a lot of the motivation stuff becomes easier. But even the best people I've seen hiring, still you mess up something or situations change. And I think that what you mentioned with the meetings, it's important that even if you don't have anything to talk about, like say it's an all-star, great
Yeah.
player, something like that, right? And they're killing it, they're doing great, they're helping the business, still have the meeting, right? You have to get to know them. You have
For
to have,
sure.
and if all you're doing is talking about their kids, if all you're doing is whatever, it's building those bonds, building that rapport that you can say, and I mean, let them say, hey, I got like four things to get to. Do you mind if we like cut this short? Sure.
Yeah.
But you, as the manager, were interested in giving them a forum one to one to be able to talk. And it doesn't have to be half an hour, right? It can be 10 minutes, right?
Yeah.
But as long as they're consistent, as long as they're, on a schedule, you'll find that they're actually, even the high performers, they'll actually come up with great ideas in those meetings,
Well, that's the
right?
thing, right? To your point, I think a lot of it is like hey, like again, if it just also like that time could just be words of affirmation, right? Like,
Yeah.
hey, I know we don't have much to talk about, but it's because you're crushing it. Like,
Yeah. Like this is where you were
that's
awesome
it.
this week. Yeah.
Exactly. That's it.
Yeah.
And it's just going through that process with somebody, you know what I mean? And just talking through it. So,
And
I think that's
especially a
awesome.
high performer, they have their own kind of like critique in their head typically. Like they want to do well at the job. You see, hard business times, they're still working well, not even if they don't get the bonuses, right? So you to take that time to be able to say, like, look, man, I notice it. It's awesome. Let's go.
Exactly.
Right. They don't all have to be like performance correction meetings.
Yeah. Yeah,
So yeah.
exactly. That
No,
that's it.
I
That's even a great point you just kind of made up just now, right? Like I think that's the problem when you don't have regular meetings. Because then when you
yeah.
have a meeting, it's a negative, right? So people are like, "Oh, I got to have a meeting with you." It's like, "Well, it shouldn't be the problem." Like again, if you're say we meet, let's call it 48 times a year, right? If I meet
Yeah.
with say I meet with an employee, they're taking vacation, I'm taking vacation, whatever, but right, let's call it 45 times a year.
Yeah.
If 44 of those interactions are positive,
Hmm.
right? When I have that one tough conversation, I'm gonna have equity with that person. So I'm not just gonna get smashed and be like, oh, Brian's a jerk. You can't make meetings always negative. They have to be positive experience. That was such a great point of it. Like that's why they're so important because you create the density of positivity. And then
Yeah.
ultimately, when you layer something in, people respect you a lot more. When I started doing regular meetings, I noticed a lot of improvement within our
Well,
company, big
and
time.
I think if anybody listening to this podcast gets anything out of this, especially any solopreneurs kind of going into I got to hire my first people and all that, the biggest thing I think is what Brian just said is set up meetings, keep it consistent, get that relationship down, even if it's something more just appreciation than correction, and realize that as long as you're transparent with people, they're willing to give you a lot of leeway. As long as you have that guiding principle of where you want to go as a business, all the stuff you talk about in the interview, it's not fake. People have a big BS detector, right?
Yeah,
And as long as you work with that, as long as you get the the kind of message across, it'll give you a lot of ways to screw up, man. I've seen some people say really stupid things in meetings, and because they had the 40 other meetings that were good, the person's like, "You didn't mean that, right?" Like, "Oh no, I didn't." Is that how you heard it? Yeah. Oh, okay. Versus if it's the only time you ever talk to the person, it's like, screw this guy, right?
100%.
And you
100%.
have to, as a manager, carve that time out and
Yeah.
look at it as revenue producing time,
Yeah.
right? Because it's loss aversion. If that person leaves, you know how expensive it is to hire another person.
Yeah.
What business you lose out on. So that's if I could say anything to a new manager, it's put that in your schedule and do not let it go for anything.
Yeah. No, I agree with that, man. I agree. I think that was really well put. And what I would say, Owen, right, to you, is if you're looking to grow your PT business, PhysioGrowth provides the mentorship and tools you need to succeed. Visit school.com/physiogrowth mentorship group and unlock your practice's potential today.
Ooh, you
Good
you did that
transition.
nice and slow, so you didn't screw up.
That's the key.
I talk like I was just plugged into an electrical socket, but
Exactly. But no, I mean, I think you're dead on, man. And I think, again, having a clear company mission,
mm,
making sure that you're appreciating your people and being employee centric in that way and taking the time to actually meet with them on a regular basis to hear all their good, bad, and the ugly and
yeah,
be a part of their lives, like that is a huge huge piece. I agree.
Well, and I think to anybody listening to this, and obviously we have a mentorship group that we're promoting. This is the difference, right? I could spend every single podcast, every single week, talk about this is how you get 4 more patients. This is how you get 4 more, whatever. But like, this is the big boy stuff, right?
Yeah.
This is the how do you get to an actual big old business company, right?
Yeah.
Excuse me, I'm coughing right as I'm saying a big point.
Yeah.
But this is the stuff that you get in our group that you won't get in other groups, right?
Yeah.
Is that the Q&A sessions every week with people who can be like, huh, I've seen that. This is how we handled it, right?
Yeah.
At every point along your business. Brian from the trunk of his car, me up until helping to sell something for 8 figures.
Yeah.
So if you want to, get in that group, man. $99
So,
a month for weekly Q&As.
you know what's good too? I
Love
mean, honestly, we just talked about this whole thing. Like, if you find yourself being like, God, I'm always complaining to my employees about my business, and they don't care, right?
Mhm.
That's
Of course
because
they
they
don't.
don't
Yeah.
care. They're there
Yeah.
for you, and you're supposed to give them positive affirmation. If you need to bitch to people about how to do that, join our group, and you can complain to me all you want, and we'll talk about it because I'm in the trenches with you, and we'll do it
Yeah.
together. So anyway,
We
that's
love hearing people bitch
I
to us.
love it. Exactly. We'll complain. We'll problem solve. We'll do all that stuff. I will care about your business like you will. So exactly. That's the whole point about mentorship groups and communities and being involved in communities with other business owners. I think it's huge.
Yeah. All right,
So,
man.
all right,
With
man.
that, we will end it. Have a solid Thursday.
You too, buddy. Good to see you.
See ya.